2013's Upstream Color, written, directed, produced, edited, composed by, and starring Shane Carruth, is about two people, Chris and Jeff, whose lives are unknowingly influenced by a worm-like parasite which has a 3-stage life cycle. A man known only as the Thief initiates the cycle when he drugs Chris with the harvested parasite. The worm has a hypnotic effect on Chris, which the Thief uses to distract Chris and steal money from her. When the Thief finally leaves, Chris awakens with no memory of the havoc she caused to her home, the self-inflicted wounds on her body, or her liquidation of her home equity. A pig farmer and audio recorder known only as the Sampler then advances the parasite to the second stage of its life cycle by drawing Chris to his farm through the use of low-frequency sounds. He then transfers the worm from Chris's body into that of a pig. A few months later, Chris meets Jeff on a train, and the two begin to form a relationship as a result of a seemingly unexplainable natural bond. Through a series of parallel shots, the audience then discovers that Jeff also underwent similar trauma, and that their two corresponding pigs have also formed a relationship, resulting in pregnancy and the birth of several piglets. The Sampler soon gathers the piglets and throws them, contained within a burlap sack, into a river where they drown. A blue substance eventually bursts forth from the decaying piglets and colors the nearby orchids, the same orchids which are purchased by the Thief to harvest the parasites. Slowly but surely, Chris and Jeff begin to remember their personal histories, and by examining their own OCD-like rituals, they begin to piece together what happened to them both, eventually tracking down the Sampler and shooting him. The cycle is finally broken. The other victims are informed of what happened to them, and since no more pigs are drowned, the orchids in the river lose their blue hue, and the Thief loses the source of the parasitic worms. The victims of this strange trauma are finally able to find some form of peace. The brilliance of Upstream Color comes in its abilities to manipulate sound and utilize mirroring shots in order to create a duality between man, or the civilized world, and nature. Mark Olson of the Los Angeles Times put it best when he wrote that the film is somehow at once emotionally direct while narratively abstract. Part of the power of Upstream Color may be that it is not afraid to remain silent and allow for the viewer to be moved with the same emotions as the main characters. The success of the film hinges on its ability to make the viewer comprehend the interconnectedness of Chris, Jeff, and their respective pigs without stating the connection outright. Ordinary day-to-day sounds heard at the workplaces of Chris and Jeff send them into a sort of trance because the sounds are reminiscent of artificial sounds created and recorded by the Sampler back at his farm. These sounds are the first indication of this interconnectedness of man and nature. The second major proof of this comes when Chris and Jeff consummate their love, and we see them symbolically laying within the pig pen. Immediately following this are two parallel shots where the pigs are eating in the pen while the human couple makes breakfast. The proof of the connection between man and beast comes to a traumatic head when the human couple suffers phantom pains and aggression after losing their piglets, which they don't even realize that they have lost. One of the most compelling symbols in the film is Henry David Thoreau's Walden, which Chris, along with the other victims of the parasite, as we later discover, was forced to copy by hand and memorize while under the hypnotic spell of the parasite and the Thief. The key breakthrough for Chris and Jeff comes when Jeff discovers Chris retrieving rocks from the bottom of a pool and reciting lines from Walden when returning to the surface. These rocks are pieces of the very earth, a literal connection to the natural world. When Chris retrieves the rocks, she is retrieving a physical manifestation of her memory, sparked by her connection to nature. Walden, being a reflection upon simple living in nature, serves as a bridge between the world of the humans and the world of the pigs, and also happens to be a perfect symbol of the film as a whole. Upstream Color may be highly narratively abstract, and it leaves plenty of room for viewers to form their own interpretation. But ultimately, like Walden, it is a work about free will, independence, and self-discovery.